Us as a bit of a departure. Do you want a society that might collate information like this as you're coming into town? Do you think it's inevitable now that all this is going to happen? Isn't that a bit of a depressing sign of the times?
Well, yeah.
Take a moment to reflect on that.
It is a sign of the times, and CCTV footage within major centres is relatively common, isn't it? And don't they talk about in places like London that there's very few places you can go where you won't be picked up on CCTV footage, in the city centre, that is. I think it is a preventative measure, and I think it's sufficient preventative measure. I'm not so keen on this microchipping idea that got put forward during the week to stop you having to have swipe cards and the like. I think that's a little bit too much Big Brother. But look, criminals are out there, and we'd like to keep an eye on them, I guess.
Before we go, transcripts of Donald Trump's phone calls with the Aussie Prime Minister and the Mexican President have both been leaked, and he told the Mexican President he had promised throngs of these crowds he appeared in front of, up to 50,000 people. He had told them that Mexico would pay for the wall, so he asked the Mexican President not to publicly contradict him on this issue. We're talking to Malcolm Turnbull. The Aussie PM says of the refugees on Nauru and Manus Island, we know exactly who they are. He implies the US won't have to take in people it doesn't want. He says the distinction is that Australia doesn't want the ones that came by boat. If they do come by boat, quote, even if we think you're the best person in the world, even if you are a Nobel Prize-winning genius, we will not let you in. This is a good idea, says President Trump. We should do that too. You're worse than I am, he says. Be all that as it may, what we're wondering, and as a former diplomat you would be interested in this, is how on earth do confidential conversations between world leaders get leaked like this? And should we welcome it in this new age of transparency?
There's plenty of opportunities. I mean, there's 6 or 7 people in the room. There's the diplomat who's writing the cable back, for US Department back in Washington. There's those at the Washington end. There's about 6 or 7 desk officers, reading these cables and then passing it up the chain. So at the end of the day, you've one message. You've probably got 30 to 40 people having read it. Any one of them could. And like I think I said previously, the Trump era is all about leaks at the moment. Particularly when the White House itself can't even control, a small building, and the leaks coming out of there, then the whole of Washington DC and its State Department and its embassies across the world are also leaking. I'm not surprised at all.
But it's the end of ethics, in a sense, isn't it, among these people? I mean, as an employee, surely it's morally reprehensible to leak. I mean, unless you've got a strong moral imperative for doing so. But this is just really, I suppose you could argue there's one here, but do you think there is?
Oh, it's, a race to the bottom when it comes to morals and ethics at the moment in Washington.
Yeah. Well, the Americans are saying it wasn't them, and the Aussies are saying it wasn't them. Do you think it's a bit of a disturbing trend, Jenny, or are you actually quite pleased to find out how they actually talk to one another?
Pleased or amused? Yeah, look, anything to do with Trump is just scary. It's absolutely, he is just the scariest person, and people are obviously feeling like they just want to undermine him all over the place, and that's what's happening.
Yeah, that'll certainly be a big factor. Thank you both for coming on the panel today. Jenny Morton has been on from Christchurch. Thanks, Jenny.
Thanks, Jim. Lovely to be on, and nice to meet you, Peter.
Thank you.
And Peter, always a pleasure to have your company in Auckland. Peter Wha'a for you.
I love it. Thank you, Jenny.
And we are back on Monday with the panel. Thank you for your company, everybody. Have a lovely weekend. John Campbell standing by with Checkpoint.
Kia ora everyone, really good program tonight. Materia Ture has ruled herself out of any ministerial positions if her party forms part of the next government. Lots on that. The Southern DHB saga continues. Checkpoint has been leaked a document revealing a full-time general surgeon is in the operating theatre only twice a month. A slow-motion train crash, senior doctors are describing the DHB as. The Minister, Jonathan Coleman, joins us live here in the studio for an extended interview. National pledges to spend up to $2.6 billion on Auckland road and rail projects. Let's do this. Labour unveils a Nike-style slogan, and Jerry Brownlee cancels New Year's Eve.
RNZ News at 5. Kia orana, good afternoon. Ko Katrina Batten tēnei. The Green Party co-leader Metiria Ture is ruling herself out of any ministerial positions if her party makes it into the government after next month's election. But she says she'll not resign over revelations. She was registered on the electoral roll at her daughter's father's address in the 1990s, despite not living there. At a news conference this afternoon, Mrs Ture said she considered resigning but decided to stay.
Have had a huge number of emails and messages just in the last 24 hours of people saying, please don't go because we need someone to speak for us on these issues. And I take that responsibility very, very seriously.
The Green Party co-leader Metiria Ture. The Labour leader Jacinda Ardern says she would have ruled out Metiria Ture of any possible ministerial positions if the Greens co-leader hadn't done it herself. The Labour Party has unveiled its new election campaign slogan, Let's Do This. That will replace its tagline under the previous leader, Andrew Little, a fresh approach. Jacinda Ardern says the new slogan came about naturally.
It's not just about the next 7 weeks. It's about what we can do if we are in a position to make change. I'm excited by this campaign and by what's possible. So let's do this.
Jacinda Ardern will launch a new policy on infrastructure from Auckland on Sunday. At least 3 senior staff have resigned from the beleaguered Southern District Health Board. The DHB confirmed the departures this afternoon. Lydia Anderson reports.
The Southern DHB has been struggling with understaffing and resourcing problems. 10 prostate cancer patients had to wait 7 months for urgent surgery that was meant to be done within a month. This morning, Labour MP David Clark told RNZ News the DHB's head of nursing, chief financial officer and human resources manager have all resigned this week for different reasons. The DHB's chief executive Chris Fleming says the changes come as a result of the DHB's ongoing leadership restructuring, and some of the roles had been disestablished. He says the changes did not happen overnight, the DHB is not melting down, and talk of a leadership crisis is not accurate. Ko Lydia Anderson Naho.
A family facing eviction from their state house just a few weeks after their mother died in a car crash will be found another house. Housing New Zealand had given Miria Esera and the 9 other members of her family 3 weeks to leave the home, and Ms Esera had been worried they'd be out on the street. But the housing agency had changed its stance, and Ms Esera hopes her family will now be able to settle and take time to grieve.
It's actually taken a lot off my shoulders. They can't promise that I'll be in the same house, but they do have something lined up.
Miria Esera says changing houses doesn't matter as long as the children and the house are warm and dry. The government says it will release details soon on who will pay for the $2.6 billion worth of transport projects it plans to speed up in Auckland. The 5 projects had already been agreed with the Auckland Council, but will now be built sooner, including the Northwestern Busway. Our Auckland correspondent Todd Nile reports.
Exactly when the projects will begin isn't yet known, but Auckland's Mayor Phil Goff describes the list as a good start. The Minister of Transport, Simon Bridges, says the government will pay most of it and will fund the council's Amity project, a busway and arterial route to the east. Public transport advocate Matt Lowry has welcomed significant spending on public transport, but says the Northwestern Busway should have been built much sooner. Labour's transport spokesperson Michael Wood promises to unveil a larger policy on Sunday. In Auckland, Todd Nile.
A court hearing has taken place over an alleged plot to set off a bomb on a plane leaving Sydney. Khaled Kayat and his brother Mahmoud Kayat are alleged to have planned to smuggle an improvised explosive device onto a Jakarta-bound plane from Sydney. They're also accused of planning to detonate a gas bomb with highly toxic chemicals. Federal Police Deputy Commissioner Michael Fallon says officers thwarted one of the most sophisticated terror plots ever attempted on Australian soil. It's 5:04. To sport, attitude, not altitude, is the mantra for the Crusaders ahead of Sunday morning's Super Rugby final against the Lions in South Africa and Johannesburg. The altitude has undone numerous visiting teams to Ellis Park, the most recent being the Hurricanes, who crumbled late in their semi-final loss last weekend. But the Crusaders and All Blacks hooker Cody Taylor says the team doctor has told them altitude doesn't take a toll physically and it's all in the mind. The Jamaican sprint legend Usain Bolt will bring the curtain down on his illustrious career at the Track and Field World Champs starting in London this weekend. Bolt, who's won 8 Olympic gold medals and 11 world titles, will compete in the 100 metres and the 4x100 metre relay. He's confident he'll win gold in both events and then says he'll head off to play football with his mates and have fun.
I think it's time for me to slow down a little bit, you know what I mean? After I retire, I just want to take it slow and relax a little bit. I think I've just done so much already and I feel accomplished.
Usain Bolt. Olympic shot put bronze medalist Tom Walsh will captain the New Zealand team at the event. In the Silver Ferns mid-quarter, Grace Rasmussen has signed with the Northern Stars for next year's ANZ Netball Premiership, leaving the Waikato Bay of Plenty Magic, where she's been for the past 4 years. That's the news.
Tonight on Nights, chickens come home to roost on Country Life. Well, actually, they're roosting at the Waikato Poultry and Pigeon Club Fair. There's a mixtape from Melody Thomas, host of Bang, our excellent series on sex and sexuality, who also hosts Music 101 from time to time. And we are dedicating our Sonic Tonic to the songs and sound bites of Paper on Nights. You'll have it in writing from me, Brian Crump, after the news at 7 on RNZ National.
Met Service weather through to midnight tomorrow. Gisborne, Hawke's Bay, Wairarapa and Wellington. A few showers clearing tomorrow and fine spells increasing. And for the rest of the North Island, fine apart from isolated showers in Auckland and Coromandel tomorrow. Coastal Marlborough, a few showers clearing tomorrow and becoming fine. For the remainder of the South Island, mainly fine, however light rain in Bulla, Westland and Fiordland tomorrow night. And the Chatham Islands, cloudy periods and a few light showers. It's 5:07 and you're listening to Checkpoint.
Thank you so much, Katrina. We were going to begin tonight with Materia Ture, who is not resigning but who will not be a Cabinet Minister in a Labour Greens government should there be one. But our package is stuck in the machinery and we have a fantastic program, so we're going to lead with our other big story of the night, the situation at the Southern DHB and more particularly at Dunedin Hospital. We've covered this at length over the past fortnight, as you know. But tonight we have an internal document that seems to make sense of much of what we've been saying. Checkpoint has been leaked a joint letter from some of the hospital's most senior medical staff to representatives of DHB management. It was sent in April. We're going to read from it at length when the Minister joins us later live here in the studio, but it describes a slow-motion train crash and says, quote, nothing has been done to prevent the crisis the DHB now faces. More on that when the Minister joins us. He's coming in from the airport now. But we begin with one more example from the urology department. Ewan Kirstens went to his GP late last year. Routine checks found elevated PSA levels in his blood and an enlarged prostate. Was it cancer? His GP sent him to Dunedin Hospital for further tests. Ewan Kirsten himself takes up his story.
This happened in December. I wasn't even seen in the hospital just for the initial cursory examination until March. And at that point, I was told I'd get a biopsy within a month or two. After 3 months, I rang up and they said it was now looking like it'd be 4 months from that point. And I rang up again a few days ago, and they now said she couldn't even tell me when it would be, and that they were still working their way through people from December.
So your first visit to the hospital was in December of last year. We are now in August, and you still don't know when you're getting a biopsy.
That's right. That's exactly how it is, yeah.
And therefore, you still don't know whether you've got cancer.
That's right.
Ewan, we're about to talk to the Health Minister, well, a bit later in the program. What would you like to say to him about the situation that you are experiencing and lots of people that we have spoken to or heard about over the past few nights on Checkpoint are experiencing?
Well, I'd like to tell them that they've got it all wrong. That it seems to be all about money. You know, I'd like them to really, give a damn, and just adopt some policies that make sense.
Ewan Kirstens, who went to the hospital after his GP referred him last December. He still hasn't had a biopsy. Jonathan Coleman, the Minister, will join us about 20 to 6. Dr Daniel Pettigrew is Ewan's Dunedin GP. He told us this afternoon Ewan isn't the only one of his patients waiting for a biopsy. In fact, Ewan's wait is at the shorter end of the scale.
Basically, I've got 4 patients who are waiting for biopsy, and they've been waiting for between 7 and 14 months for that from referral.
Wait a minute. 4 patients that you have referred on the basis of the possibility that you have seen as their GP that they've got prostate cancer?
Yeah, that is correct, yeah.
And they've been waiting how long for their biopsies?
Most of them, they've all been seen in clinic within 6 months, but then there's the wait time to biopsy, which is even longer. So I've got one patient that's been waiting 9 months for his biopsy and still hasn't heard anything. Most of these patients will be seeing me in the meantime. So often, as part of their care, I'll send another letter through to urology, and that's the other thing that became apparent, is that I'm just sending letters left, right and centre, reminder letters essentially. Please see this patient who you told me you're going to do this biopsy on or you're going to see.
Do you get replies?
Not usually, no, but sometimes we get action quickly, but not all of these ones have.
And so what's your sense? Are these delays, these waiting periods, too long?
Oh, absolutely, they're too long. Yeah, they're outside the department's guidelines, they're outside the ministry's guidelines. And patient experience of this is not just frustrating, but actually quite concerning. Patients are worried about, have I got cancer, or am I worrying about nothing? And we'll be sort of babysitting the patients through this. We'll recheck some blood tests, we might check them again and say, well, it doesn't look like it's getting any worse, or, well, actually is getting worse, let's try and hurry this up a bit more.
Have you seen, sorry to interrupt, have you seen situations where it is getting worse and they are still not being seen?
In terms of diagnostic probability, yes, I guess. There are patients whose for example, the blood test, I will repeat the blood test just because we want to know, is it getting worse? And yes, they are going up. So, yep, we are seeing that.
What are the symptoms? What are people... So when you refer someone to Dunedin Hospital for a prostate biopsy, what are the symptoms they're presenting with?
Sometimes they will have no symptoms. Usually they will have been tested as a part of a workup for symptoms like difficulty passing urine or going more frequently overnight, those kind of things. But then as part of the workup they will have had a prostate check, which will usually involve both a finger up the backside and also a blood test. So it will usually be on the basis of one or other or even both of those.
So you do the finger up the bum and the blood test before you refer them to the hospital, and you refer them to the hospital on the basis of what you find in those tests?
That's correct, yeah.
And then you have had people waiting for up to 9 months for a biopsy?
Yeah, and that's after having, that particular chap had been waiting 5 months to be seen in clinic in the first place. So he's actually been waiting 14 months now from the point of clinical suspicion. And
does he know whether he has cancer or not after 14 months?
No.
Is this good enough?
No. I think, can I just break in here as well? Because I think the other thing just to highlight here is, while there's all the speed up on urology going on at the moment, this is not just a urology problem at Southern DHB. We are experiencing similar, maybe not to the same extreme, but similar kind of experiences with referring patients to many other departments in the Southern DHB. And, there's obviously been stories in the media about surgery and ophthalmology and various other departments down here, but it's across the board.
And can I ask you, so far you have talked to us about your absolute experience of referring patients and watching them wait and wait, but now I guess I'm asking you to try and do a big picture take on why they're waiting so long. Do you think it is because of insufficient resources?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, as much as the minister may say, we've got to do more with less, the reality is you can only underfund a health service for so long before that starts translating to the frontline services. And that's exactly where we are now. I mean, we're heading towards a third world health system here.
That's Dunedin GP, Dr. Daniel Pettigrew. Now, we have this extraordinary letter that it's been leaked to us from senior medical staff within the DHB. The Minister is coming from the airport and he will join us in the studio, and there is much to discuss with him. Do stay with us. Also coming up, Materia Ture. We would love your feedback tonight. Text us 2101. You can tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ, Facebook Checkpoint with John Campbell, or email for those of you who want to send a more lengthy missive, checkpoint@radionz.co.nz. National has opened the election campaign, its election campaign, bidding on transport in Auckland by pledging to spend up to $2.6 billion worth of road and rail projects. Public transport projects such as the North Western Busway are on the list, but Labor says plenty more should be done to get the city really moving. Our Auckland correspondent Todd Niall reports.
Word seemingly got out sooner than National planned on work it had been doing to speed up projects already on the 30-year shopping list the government had agreed with the Auckland Council.
Mill Road has an estimation of around $955 million, North Western Busway $835, Amity.
The Transport Minister Simon Bridges won't say exactly when work will start, but 5 projects including extending rail electrification from Papakura to Pukekohe are within a decade and sooner than previously planned.
These projects and consideration of them will help close up the so-called funding gap that is there of upwards of $7 billion of the $27 billion of investment that Auckland and government agree we want to be doing over the next decade.
Also on the list within a decade, an additional track on the main trunk rail line for freight through southern Auckland, the government funding the council's Amity busway and arterial route out east, and the Mill Road arterial near Mararewa. It's got a lukewarm reception from Matt Lowry, an editor on the transport website Greater Auckland, although he did welcome some big spending on public transport.
I guess in some cases it's better late than never. We've seen with the North Western Busway, that should have been built as part of all the widening that's only just finished and that we've just cut the ribbon on. And now having to go dig up some of that again to build a busway seems a bit pointless and poor planning at the very least.
The rubber will hit the road for Labor in Auckland on Sunday, with its transport spokesperson Michael Wood saying there's plenty more to do.
What we've had today from the government is a reheated announcement of things that are already in the Auckland Transport Alignment Plan, and incredibly, no mention of whether they're going to connect the city to its airport. So we certainly don't feel gazumped. We're really proud of the vision and the policy that we've been putting together.
Michael Wood succeeded Phil Goff as the Labor MP for Mount Roskill, and Mr Goff, who's now Mayor of Auckland, is enjoying all of the focus on transport.
I think there is a growing recognition across the board that when a city is growing by 45,000 people a year, extraordinary measures have to be taken to stop that city becoming gridlocked and to stop that city becoming unaffordable.
The Green Party's also still in the wings, having had a few other things on its mind this week, but it's previously endorsed an alternative plan for the city with extensive light rail routes and busways. I tamaki makoro mo te hotaka o te ahiahi, ko Todd Niall tēnei.
Right, let's turn now, as promised, to Materia Ture, who is not resigning but will not be a cabinet minister in a Labor Greens government should there be one. Today she ruled herself out of any ministerial portfolios, including the portfolio she has so desperately wanted. More on that when we talk to her later. Labor's new leader had said she would have done the same thing. She said it a bit later in the afternoon, but it was very much doing the rounds in Wellington. Materia Ture does join us after 6 o'clock, but first here's our political reporter, May Heron.
Materia Ture's admission nearly 2 weeks ago that she lied to work and income about having flatmates while on the DPB in the 1990s was deliberate and designed to get publicity and trigger debate about the welfare system. However, yesterday it emerged that Mrs Ture registered on the electoral roll at her daughter's father's address in the 1990s, despite not living there, so she could vote for a friend who was standing as a candidate for the McGillicuddy Serious Party. She admits it crossed her mind to resign altogether.
I considered it.
But she says after getting support from her party and countless messages, she's decided to stay.
I'm not resigning, I'm not standing down. I know I have the backing of the party for making this decision. I know it's been a difficult decision for them and for me.
However, Materia Ture wouldn't explain why she wasn't fit for a ministerial position, but yet was capable of staying on as a co-leader. Questions around her character and whether she was trustworthy also popped up, but she shot them down.
New Zealanders can trust me to speak on behalf of those who can't speak for themselves because they are too vulnerable. New Zealanders can trust me to put their interests first when it comes to protecting them from discrimination and a penal welfare system.
The Greens co-leader, who entered Parliament in 2002, says until now she genuinely hadn't remembered registering for an electorate she was not living in, and it was foolish to have done so. Matiria Ture is pretty sure there's nothing else to be revealed, but she admits she can't remember everything that happened 20 years ago.
This is, I guess, the issue is that when you open your life to this kind of scrutiny, all sorts of things will come up that you don't remember. It was a long time ago now. So I don't think so, but I just don't know.
What's not clear is how much influence the Labour Party's attitude had on Matiria Ture's decision. Labour says it raised some concerns and told the Green Party if Mrs Ture didn't rule herself out as a future minister, it would have. This morning, Deputy Leader Kelvin Davis told the AM show things weren't great.
It's turned to mushy peas for her, hasn't it? It's pretty ugly, and I just think if you're going to be open up about yourself like that, you've got to tell the whole truth and nothing but the truth, and don't leave little bits out.
Labour's newly minted leader, Jacinda Ardern, says it's a sad set of circumstances.
She's reflected on the issue herself and has come to the conclusion that it would have been untenable. I think she made the right decision.
She says if she was the Prime Minister and it was her cabinet, Mrs Ture would go. But Jacinda Ardern refuses to say that her view forced Matiria Ture's hand today.
I can't tell you at what point even Matiria made the decision. She may well have made it at the point that our view was conveyed. It was her decision, and I'm certainly going to hold the line that dignity needs to be given to Matiria on this front. She made the decision. We certainly shouldn't make assumptions that anyone else influenced her view.
All MPs, of course, have a past, and some, such as Labour's Ruth Dyson and Trevor Mallard, have convictions. Even National's campaign manager Stephen Joyce, while the Transport Minister back in 2010, admitted he had 2 convictions for careless driving. Although today he was keener to draw attention elsewhere.
The whole left thing's looking a bit like a circus this week. We've had one leader go, we've had another leader stay, but the leader isn't fit to be a cabinet minister, but she's still the leader. I think the public will be looking at all of that and going, well, this is all a bit confusing, and these people, want to be considered to run the country in 7 weeks' time.
It's unlikely Matiria Ture will be prosecuted for electoral fraud, as it was minor, though she admits it could still happen. Meanwhile, the Ministry of Social Development is still investigating Mrs Ture's benefit history, and there's no indication whether that will be wrapped up before the election in just over 7 weeks' time. From Parliament for Checkpoint, May Heron.
Couple of pieces of feedback to share with you that represent the fairly split response to this story from you, our wonderful listeners. Sorry, Matiria, thanks for all you have done for the Green Party, but now it's time to go. From somebody describing themselves as a Green Party member. And kia kaha, Matiria, she has guts, integrity and compassion, exactly what we need in Parliament. And she's made mistakes and is owning those, unlike so many politicians. Keep up the fight against poverty, Matiria. You've got my vote. The woman herself will speak to us after 6 o'clock tonight, 5:23 now. Jacinda Ardern's promised to bring her own stamp to Labour's campaign as the party's new leader. And this afternoon we saw the first hint of that as she unveiled a brand spanking new slogan, Let's do this. Heading into the election, our political reporter Craig McCulloch did it by going.
Forget policies, forget personalities. Everybody knows elections are decided by slogans.
Labour's always believed in our ability to do better. Andrew Little and Labour. It's time for a fresh approach for New Zealand.
So what's Labour's fresh approach to replace a fresh approach? Its new rallying cry, its clarion call to the masses.
When I first wrote a post on social media about the campaign, I finished it with the most natural conclusion. Let's do this.
Let's do this. With a whiff of a Nike ad and that relentless positivity, could this be Labour's Yes We Can? The solution to its electoral woes? Forget market testing, forget focus groups. Jacinda Ardern's playing the maverick, taking a less conventional approach.
We tested on ourselves, asked a few people. Certainly nothing that I would call rigorous or robust.
And Stephen Joyce reckons it shows. National's campaign man is already putting in the boot.
It just appears to be more about the Labour Party than the New Zealand public. Normally, if you're going to have a campaign slogan, you make it about New Zealanders and their aspirations and their families, and this seems to be more about the Labour Party.
National's tagline's about distribution, delivering for New Zealanders. And their latest ad is about as far removed from M&M as you can imagine.
They're
that long white cloud was hanging in the sky when you were just a twinkle in your daddy's eye.
Just about as important as taglines when it comes to winning elections, billboards, and lots of them. Labour's decided to go back to the basics. The signs will feature just Jacinda Ardern front and centre. Her new deputy, Calvin Davis, doesn't feel slighted, joking he's happy to kick back and bask in the glow of the Jacinda effect.
In fact, I was telling the story about my cousin. His nickname's Creature. His real name's Jimmy. We were grave digging, and he goes, "Calvin, I'm voting for Jacinda." Now, if you can get Creature interested in voting, if Jacinda can get Creature interested in voting, she's nailed it.
Amongst all the hoopla, some policy changes are also expected. Ms Ardern's already signalled some changes ahead. Her first announcement, a transport-related policy, over the weekend. From Parliament for Checkpoint, Craig McCulloch.
Let's go from the capital to the US capital, where the Washington Post has today published the White House's transcript of a heated telephone call between Donald Trump and Australian Prime Minister Malcolm Turnbull in January. During the call, the US President described Australia's immigration policy as worse than his own hardline approach, although it seems to have been an admiring description. The transcript shows Malcolm Turnbull pleaded with Mr Trump to honour the deal that existed between President Obama and Australia, and insisted that the US President could do so without actually accepting any refugees. It's a very bizarre conversation indeed. The ABC's North American correspondent Stephanie March has more.
The phone call on January 28 started pleasantly enough, with Mr Turnbull and Mr Trump discussing their business backgrounds and their mutual friend, star golfer Greg Norman. The leaked transcript of the conversation shows the tone quickly deteriorated when Mr Turnbull raised the issue of the deal signed by the Obama administration, in which the US agreed to take refugees from Manus Island and Nauru in exchange for Australia resettling Central Americans. The transcript of the call was leaked to Washington Post correspondent Greg Miller.
When you read the full transcript here, it's so acrimonious. There's so much anger and hostility.
According to the transcript, Mr Trump told Mr Turnbull the deal made him look like a dope after having just announced a refugee ban. Mr Turnbull repeatedly told Mr Trump he didn't have to accept any refugees to honour the deal, but just has to vet them.
Well, for Trump, it's all about perceptions and how this reflects on him. And Turnbull maybe comes off a bit better, but also he is not fighting for these displaced individuals. He is fighting to preserve this deal that he has to hold together to empty these detention centres.
Mr Turnbull explained to Mr Trump that Australia was refusing to resettle the refugees in order to deter people smugglers, not because the refugees are bad people. As Mr Turnbull explained that Australia's strict policy would not even allow a Nobel Peace Prize winner who came by boat to be resettled, Mr Trump interrupted with praise.
At one point, Turnbull is explaining we don't take these people that arrive on boats in our shores, and just Trump interrupts, "Oh, that's a great idea. God, you're worse than I am." He means that as a compliment. You are meaner, you are, more extreme. You have a more extreme position than even I do on this, and therefore I like it.
Mr Turnbull pleaded with Mr Trump to stick to the deal and promised that if he did, Australia would accept anyone you want us to take. Throughout the call, Mr Trump showed a limited understanding of the deal and broader immigration policies.
So the grasp is minimal at best for Trump. He doesn't know the numbers on this deal accurately. He talks about up to 5,000, which is not what the terms call for. Doesn't understand where they come from, doesn't understand why they're there, doesn't understand why Australia can't admit them.
Throughout the call, Mr Turnbull appeared to retain a diplomatic tone, trying to advise an angry Mr Trump on how to honour the deal while saving face with his constituents. Mr Trump agreed to honour what he called a stupid deal only because his hand had been forced by his predecessor. It's highly unusual for a transcript between two leaders to be made public. The White House is yet to comment on the leaked transcript.
5:29, you're with Checkpoint on RNZ. Thank you for being with us. Coming up on the program, the Southern DHB saga continues. A leaked document obtained by Checkpoint reveals a full-time general surgeon in Dunedin is in the operating theatre only twice a month. A slow-motion train crash. Senior doctors are describing their own DHB as in an internal letter to their managers. The Minister, Jonathan Coleman, joins us live here in the studio for an extended interview on the DHB's cardiac delays, urology delays and its lack of ICU beds. He has just arrived in the building and we are looking forward very much to talking to him. We would love your feedback. You can text us on 2101, you can tweet us at Checkpoint NZ, Facebook of course we are on it and you can watch us on it, and our email address is checkpoint@radionz.co.nz. Lots of feedback already coming in. I had an incredible experience at Dunedin Hospital ER over summer. I arrived by helicopter with my 8-year-old who has a head injury, and we waited 2 hours with about 8 other people in hospital beds lining the corridors in third world conditions. The staff were totally overworked and just couldn't cope. The stress levels were palpable. Hi John, this country is not God's own. That joke is over. Why is looking after 6 people such a low priority? Why not slash spending on sport, art, tourism and refugees? Health is a basic right, says Mike. And Martin says, hi John, why don't we all pay tax instead of suffering poor health, education, police, etc. More tax, Martin wants. Stop complaining, start paying. With respect to the Greens, lies, damn lies, then Greens. To misquote, I was a single parent, struggled and raised 2 teenagers and I didn't cheat the system. Others also need money, said Martin. Nona is next with business, and then the Health Minister Jonathan Coleman joins us live. But before all of it, at 5:30, here's the headlines.
The Green Party co-leader Materia Ture is ruling herself out of any ministerial positions if her party makes it into government after next month's election. But she says she'll not resign over revelations she was registered on the electoral roll at her daughter's father's address in the 1990s, despite not living there. At a news conference this afternoon, Mrs Ture said she considered resigning but decided to stay. The Labour leader, Jacinda Ardern, says she would have ruled out Materia Ture of any possible ministerial positions if Mrs Ture hadn't done it herself. Meanwhile, the Labour Party has unveiled its new election campaign slogan, Let's Do This. That'll replace its tagline under the previous leader, Andrew Little, A Fresh Approach. 3 key staff have resigned from the Southern District Health Board amid its struggle with understaffing and resourcing problems. The Chief Executive, Chris Fleming, says the changes come as a result of the DHB's ongoing leadership restructuring. He says the changes didn't happen overnight and the DHB is not melting down. Housing New Zealand will now find another place to live for a family facing eviction from their state house just a few weeks after their mother died in a car crash. Housing New Zealand had given Miria Esera and the 9 other members of her family 3 weeks to leave. The government says it will release details soon on who will pay for the $2.6 billion worth of transport projects it plans to speed up in Auckland. The 5 projects had already been agreed with the Auckland Council, but will now be built sooner, including the Northwestern Busway. And trucks have started carting rubble away from a large slip blocking Ngaio Gorge, a major route into central Wellington. However, it won't be cleared until the middle of next week. Those are the headlines. I'm back at 6 o'clock.
Which is 27 minutes away. Thank you very much indeed, Katrina Batten. Nona Peltier, let's do this. Well,
it's Friday.
A new report shows the gender pay gap for non-executive directors has narrowed.
That's right.
What are the latest figures in the area? Tell us.
Okay, so a few years back when we started paying attention to the gender pay gap, say 2015, the difference between a male and female non-executive director was $8,000. And today it's 4. So it's an improvement by, 10% difference this year, 22% difference 3 years ago.
Do we know about the gender balance in terms of numbers of people who
Yes, we do. I got some numbers there.
I just sprung that on you. Have you got
I
them?
just happen to have those numbers
Nona.
indeed. Yes. Okay, so look, about 18% of the NZX listed companies have women on their boards.
18%?
Yeah.
1 in 5.
But when we started counting, just 2013, so 5 years ago, it was only 12%. So really, the Institute of Directors who did this report say this still isn't good enough. We need to do a whole lot better.
It's not even close to good enough, is it?
Not at all. No, it really isn't, because all the research that we've seen from international sources and New Zealand too, is that boards that have a lot of diversity, and not just with gender, but with ethnic groups and so on, do better because the diversity of opinion improves the governance of the particular organization or company or what have you. Now, interestingly, women are overrepresented on these not-for-profit boards where they work for very little or no pay. And so overall, the Institute of Directors, their report pointed to a level of dissatisfaction with the pay generally. So, you know, a non-executive director, an average or median average is $44,000. And they attend, say, an average of 9 meetings a year. There's a lot of...
5 nights of 45, right? So $44,000,
yeah,
5 nights of 45?
Yeah, it sounds like it's a lot.
So they're getting $5,000 a meeting.
Yeah, it sounds like a lot. But the
plus those biscuits and a cup of tea.
They got the biscuits and the sausage rolls for those special annual meetings, right?
Yeah.
But nevertheless, some people are saying, look, that's not enough. So get this, 72% of the people who are on the boards that are listed companies are pretty satisfied with their pay. But of the ones who are not, and this would be primarily, believe it or not, people who sit on land boards, iwi Maori boards, only about 22% of them are satisfied with their pay. So it just goes to show you really quite a disparity there in terms of gender pay and just generally ethnic and other not-for-profit type of changes between one and the other. So if you're a listed company, you're going to get the big bucks.
Fascinating figures. Thanks. Now, how did the markets finish the week?
Actually, a little bit off our high. So yesterday we reached a high of 7,754. Today we were 8 points down. So 7,746 is where we finished up, and our dollar was steady. Now, interestingly, the U.S. Political situation is it's not very friendly to the US dollar. And so the New Zealand dollar is holding steady at 74.3, 93.3 Australian and 56.6 British pence.
Nona Peltier, who has done business for us all week, thank you so much and have a fantastic weekend, Nona. In a few minutes, the Health Minister, Jonathan Coleman, joins us live here in the Auckland studio to discuss the unfolding crisis at the Southern DHB. And in fact, we have an internal document that uses that word, crisis. But first, let's hear again from the patients, their families, the doctors, the specialists, and even welcome, Minister.
Hi, John. How are you?
Yeah, very good. Very good.
Well.
Yeah, good. Yeah, good.
Excellent.
Now, so we're just going to play a track, right? And so we're going to look back over our coverage of the past week or two, and we're going to listen to patients, families, doctors, specialists, and even DHB bosses who all agree to varying degrees that whilst the staff are doing the best job they can, the situation at Dunedin Hospital is untenable, and they need an urgent cash injection from you, the Minister. So I'm delighted to have you here so you can listen to this.
Good to be here.
Yes, so listen to this package. Bridget Burke put it together, and it begins with Bridget Telfer, the daughter of Mosgiel pensioner Merv Telfer, who has had his cardiac surgery cancelled 7 times.
16th of May, he was told it was urgent and they hoped to have it done in 30 days. And what he was told was that, yes, he definitely needs a heart valve replacement. He definitely needs a double bypass, but once they get in, it could be triple, it could be quadruple, they won't actually know. And that his arteries were 80% blocked.
Okay, so he was told that in May, and since then it's been postponed 7 times, including twice after he was admitted to hospital.
Yep.
68-year-old Owen Glover died last year after his heart surgery was postponed by the Southern DHB. Here's Owen's daughter, Donna.
So they made and cancelled 4 appointments. The 5th one was supposed to be towards the end of August last year. Unfortunately, he died at the end of the first week of August, so he didn't make his so-called confirmed surgery. And, like I said, he was 68,
And what did he die of, Donna?
He died of heart related. Basically, his heart just gave up and stopped and just couldn't do it anymore,
And how many times had his appointment been cancelled or delayed or deferred?
4 times.
Nigel Miller is the Chief Medical Officer of the Southern DHB.
We sincerely regret finding ourselves in that position of not being able to meet their reasonable expectations of a surgery taking place. So I absolutely agree with you on that. It's not where we want to be at all. It has been happening more often of late, and I think that's an unsatisfactory situation, I think, as we discussed yesterday. And so we're in a really difficult place. Our clinicians are faced with this really difficult challenge, the difficult problem of, do you select the patient with cancer? Do you select the patient with scoliosis? Do you select the patient with cardiac problems? Each of which is going to suffer some significant disadvantage and potentially some harm if you don't do it straight away.
Paul Schofield paid for his own biopsy for prostate cancer in February. He's been waiting ever since for surgery that ministry guidelines say should have been done within 31 days.
The minister, who's refusing to take calls from Checkpoint, is a coward. This situation is is, it's just unacceptable. It's obviously a failure in the system, and whatever happened to ministerial responsibility? It's just this is one other thing I'd like to say. You've got a perfectly good private hospital there that's got the facilities and the gear to do it. So this is purely and simply money. It is nothing more than that. They have saved $11.5 million of their deficit by cutting back and putting people's lives at risk. I wonder what a coroner would have to say about that man that died because he was unable to get his heart surgery. And I certainly don't want to be in that category because of the incompetence of a group of people. And that's, I'm sure, those other people who are affected just like I am feel exactly the same. And I know that my family are very angry about this.
Graham Woodside is the Chief Executive of Prostate New Zealand.
Far from satisfactory, John. The Faster Cancer Treatment Program stipulates that if somebody's got a confirmed diagnosis, they should be treated within 31 days. Now, that's 1 month, not 5 months.
Dr Daniel Pettigrew is a Dunedin GP.
Basically, I've got 4 patients who are waiting for biopsy, and they've been waiting for between 7 and 14 months.
Do you think it is because of insufficient resources?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, as much as the Minister may say, we've got to do more with less, the reality is you can only underfund a health service for so long before that starts translating to the frontline services. And that's exactly where we are now. I mean, we're heading towards a third world health system here.
Kelly Gibbs's severely disabled daughter Amber had her scoliosis spinal operation cancelled as she was being prepped for surgery because of a shortage of ICU beds.
Amber's got a lot of things wrong with her. She's actually got microcephaly, scoliosis, cerebral palsy, epilepsy, developmental delay, and she has asthma. We had her all gowned up, ready to go, and the next minute the surgeon comes into the room and says to us, "We're sorry, but the surgery has to be postponed because a young guy who's had a heart attack has taken Amber's bed in ICU and they're needing a triple bypass."
Chris Fleming is the Chief Executive of the Southern DHB.
I believe that patients' care has been delayed as a consequence of delaying cases because of lack of ICU capacity. We do not have enough ICU beds, absolutely. I do apologise. The number of cancellations is just not acceptable.
Dr Alistair Hepburn is one of the Southern DHB's 3 urologists who share 2 full-time roles. He says the department is understaffed and this is delaying the treatment of cancer patients.
One of the major problems, yes. It's not the only problem, but it is one of the major problems.
People with prostate cancer?
Correct, yes.
Other forms of cancer?
Definitely, yes.
This is a difficult question for you to answer, and
Sure.
You are in a master-servant relationship with the Southern DHB, even though you are a senior urologist. But do you feel like there are real financial pressures driving what appear on the face of it to be insufficient staff numbers?
I can say that's the feeling I get, yes.
Stephen Mark is chair of the Urology Society.
There is a crisis of patient care because they've got concerns about the inability to deliver the care in the time frames that they wish to do so.
Kathy Grant is the Government Commissioner appointed to the Southern DHB by then Health Minister Tony Ryle in June 2015, after he sacked the board.
If Paul Schofield has now been waiting for over 4 months and has absolutely no idea still when his cancer is going to be treated, is that satisfactory, do you think?
No, it isn't. It isn't satisfactory. The comment that I would make is that Southern has suffered from really years of underinvestment and significant deficits. So the pathway forward is going to take a period of time. There is no
which is look, absolutely, which is all very well and good when we're talking about financial KPIs and deficits and budgets and bringing things in under what the government requires of you. But if you have prostate cancer and you are waiting for treatment and you don't know when it's coming, do you think that you want to even hear those discussions taking place?
Probably not. I acknowledge that the delays are regrettable, that the patient groups that you have been talking to do need their surgery. We are making progress. We are investing in the future of Southern DHB and initiating change.
Here's Prime Minister Bill English yesterday.
You need to ask the DHB. I mean, they're responsible for providing services. They've got some targets they're meant to adhere to, which represent good service for the public. And I would hope that if those 10 cases aren't getting the service here, then the DHB make sure they get it somewhere else.
Well, sitting beside me in the studio and sitting beside me throughout that track, which has kind of assembled what we've been doing over the past couple of weeks, is Health Minister Jonathan Coleman. It's nice to have you with us.
Good to be here,
on
John.
Checkpoint. Thank you. What do you make of all of that?
Well, look, I've got every sympathy for those people who we have heard from there. I mean, clearly they've had unacceptable service. But look, the big picture is this DHB was the worst in the country, and that is why I sacked the board back in 2015.
Financially the worst in the country, right? They had the biggest
Financially the worst in the country, but I tell you what, if you don't get the finances right, you can't provide the clinical service people deserve. And this has to be turned around. Those people should get their operations within the specified time. So things have got to change at Southern. There's a couple of departments there which I think need a real focus on clearing those waiting lists. We heard there from the urology or cases related to urology. Chris Fleming, who is doing a very good job as the CEO, as is the Commissioner, they are going to be receiving a review of that department. They tell me actually that of 10 patients who are waiting variable times for urgent radical prostate surgery, half of them now have waiting times, but they've got to do better. It's unacceptable when people are not getting their surgery within the waiting times that they should.
We've just received this email from a person who wants to remain nameless. I'm 57 and after repeated high PSA tests and DRE, which is digital rectal examination, late last year, which showed my prostate was enlarged, and the fact my father passed away from prostate cancer, I was put on the urgent list for a biopsy in January. I chased up repeatedly and finally thought I was getting my biopsy about 6 weeks ago, but it turned out to be just 10 minutes with a specialist designed to screen out non-urgent cases and reduce the list. So this man has a family history, he has an enlarged prostate and he has high PSAs. He still hasn't had a biopsy.
Yeah, and that's unacceptable. So the DHB needs to explain why that's happening, and those answers need to be provided in the review. But the key thing is, people like that gentleman, they have to be getting their surgery, their testing and then their surgery in an acceptable time, because there's been plenty of money going into the DHB. We use the same funding formula for every other district health board in New Zealand. Other DHBs are able to manage not only within their means, but crucially provide the surgery when people need it and within the specified time frame. So that's not acceptable.
Yeah, okay. Let's talk about what the doctors themselves are saying.
Yeah.
Because, look, we've spoken to the CEO, and he was in that package, Chris Fleming, and he talked about an inadequacy of ICU beds, he talked about excessively long waiting lists. We spoke to the Commissioner that you appointed 2 years ago, who conceded that people were waiting too long. We spoke to the Medical Officer of Health, Nigel Miller, who says things aren't as he would like. But what we've obtained today is an internal document sent by a group of senior doctors in April, talking about the completely predictable nature of this crisis. Inadequate theatre access in Otago. Some patients have little chance of getting an operation. They describe it as a slow motion train crash, and they say it's unfathomable how the situation has been allowed to continue. Now, it's all very well to say something is going to be done, but when?
So things are being done, actually. If you look at the number of operations in Southern, they've increased by 33% over the last 8 years.
Minister,
more surgeries all the time. Yeah, ICU beds, John. Let me just finish on ICU beds. So there's 9 available ICU beds. Chris Fleming has a plan.
8. We're going to 9 at some stage next year.
8. They've just approved the 9th. No, they'll be going up to 18 next year. They'll have the capacity to go to 18.
My understanding is they're going to 10 next August, right?
No, what they've told me is they will have the capacity as needed to expand to 18 on an as-needed basis in August.
Okay.
I've just got off the phone to Chris Fleming. He's confirmed that.
Okay, well, Chris Fleming said to us 10 last week. So
no, but there's another 8 HDU beds that they can turn into ICU beds when needed. Now, clearly, with these patients we've just heard from, I would expect those HDU beds to be used as ICU beds. So there will be a doubling of the ICU capacity at Dunedin Hospital by August. That's a pretty big increase, and that will avert a lot of these issues.
Yeah.
So you ask what's being done?
Yeah.
That's what's being done.
Within a year.
And that's what counts for the public.
In the meantime, cardiac surgery is being postponed. Surgeons are writing internal memos saying they can't do the work. I want to read
So cardiac surgery, okay. So Southern are implementing a plan to get all those people treated, and I insist that they do that. Same with the prostate surgery. Those people have to have their surgery. The public need to get the treatment that they deserve because there's plenty of money there. Just the management needs to get their act together to deliver services. And this is the whole reason I had to sack the board in the first place.
Okay, but you put your commissioner in June 2015.
Well, she's got a huge task.
Well, hold on a second.
No, she has got a huge task.
If you sack the board and appoint a commissioner, when is she going to start delivering? Well, she's not.
No, John.
Look, her surgeons say she's not. The patients say she's not.
No, they're not saying that. She's totally delivering.
Well,
okay, so there's two aspects.
Sorry,
John,
Minister, have you been listening to Checkpoint over the past fortnight?
Yep, I've heard all that stuff.
Did you hear that piece we just played?
I was in Dunedin last Friday talking with people about this issue.
I don't want to have an argument with you, and we really appreciate you being here, but I cannot recall such a sustained attack on a public hospital in my career in journalism, which stems back to 1989, than what I have heard from patients and people who work at the DHB over the past fortnight, and they are consistent in their thesis that they don't have enough money.
Well, look, John, that is not correct. The money has gone up by $40 million last year, an extra nearly $250 million over the last 9 years. The budget now is $923 million per year. It's not a matter of money. The Commissioner's done a very good job. She has halved that deficit from $42 million to $21 million this year. It'll be $14 million this year. How did she halve the deficit?
That's you've given her financial KPIs, haven't you?
But it's not at the expense of patient care. Patients come first. That's absolutely. I'm in this job.
Why are you the only person who was saying that to me?
No, John. Other people are saying that as well. Patients come first. Look, I wouldn't be doing this job as Health Minister if I didn't have a deep and very sincere dedication to providing better health services for New Zealanders. That's what we focus on every day. Across hundreds of health services across the country, you would struggle to find more than a very handful that haven't improved. Now, obviously, urology in Dunedin is a problem. It's been described to me today as a toxic department. They've got to sort their act out there. They've got to provide the radical prostatectomies, the urgent testing that people like those, really good down-to-earth New Zealanders we've just heard from deserve and should get.
Right, so urology's a problem. Ophthalmology has been a problem in the past. You talked about people waiting for cardiac surgery. ICU is a problem. Tell me what parts of the hospital are going as you would like.
Look, the whole thing needs to improve. That's why we've put the Commissioner in. But this is a big, complex service.
2 years ago,
Minister. Come on, John. Look, you can't go like that.
You sacked the board. You put in a Commissioner. You gave her financial KPIs, and she has halved the deficit. But as everyone we are talking to is saying is to us at a cost.
No, John, look, the patient care comes first. Her job is actually to get the finances in a stable condition. The reporting under the old board was up and down. Their figures changed all the time. She's doing a much better job than the old board. But the key thing is, without that clear picture of the finances, you cannot improve patient care. And the big thing is we're going to be rebuilding Dunedin Hospital. So the indicative business case, is being considered by Cabinet. There will be a new state-of-the-art hospital in Dunedin. There's no question things need to turn around.
When?
Now, when?
When?
Well, look, you'll see it when the indicative business case is released, and I can't preempt that. But I'm quite happy to come back and talk to you here about it.
Yeah, okay. Can we look at a text we just received? My husband has to wait 40 weeks for an MRI to rule out a brain tumour as the cause of hearing loss in one ear. Now, this goes back to what the surgeons are saying in that internal document in April. They are not able to do very basic work because if they assess that person had a tumour, they would then have to do something about
but John,
it.
That's a little bit unfair. We don't have the context around that case. If that person would like to email me at Parliament, I will personally look into that case.
Okay, can I read out from that letter again? A full-time general surgeon in Dunedin operates twice a month. in the operating theatre.
Sorry, who's this
twice
letter
a month. This is an internal letter sent in April to senior managers at the DHB from senior doctors at the hospital saying, we've had a guts full. This isn't working. It was leaked to us today.
To be quite frank with you, I struggle to believe that a full-time general surgeon is only doing 2 lists per month. They'd be doing 2 lists per week. Are you sure you're reading that?
2 lists per month, operating twice a month.
Well, we need to look into that because that just doesn't sound plausible.
Okay, the CEO of Mercy Hospital told us that every time somebody is stood down because of an inadequacy of ICU beds, the surgeon, who is very often prepped and ready to go, does nothing that day.
And that's why the ICU beds are going to be doubled in capacity
by when?
By August.
By August of next year. A year away.
25 million.
A year away.
John, 25 million being invested in these services in Dunedin Hospital to keep them going prior to the rebuild. A doubling of ICU capacity. Oh, look, I agree with you. Those stories we've heard are unacceptable. And that's why Chris Fleming is taking action. That's why the ICU beds are being doubled. And the wider context of that is we're rebuilding the hospital. There's an extra $250 million of funding that's gone in, and surgeries, elective surgeries, have increased by 33%.
Minister,
over the 8 years. Well ahead of population.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
But you and I both know that the elective surgeries that have increased by 33% are the smallest and easiest ones to do.
No, that's not correct.
That is absolutely correct.
It's not correct.
We're talking about trouble at the heavier,
No, that's not correct.
the more surgical end of the hospital.
All elective surgeries have increased. They have.
Are you happy with what's happening at Dunedin Hospital?
I want to see great improvement. I'm not happy when, no, let me think. I'm not happy when the people of Otago are having to wait, and the people of Southland are having to wait for surgeries that they should get within a reasonable time frame. That's unacceptable.
Why are they having to wait? If it's unacceptable, and thank you for saying that, why are they having to wait?
Well, look, we're going to find out quite a bit out of that review of the urology department. Clearly, the hospital has not been working as well as it could over some time, and it needs to turn around, but it's not a matter of money.
It's not a matter of money, because everyone else we've spoken to, including the urologists, tell us it's a matter of money. Chris Fleming said,
and you know
when we spoke to him about the ICU beds, we need the money.
Well, he's getting the money for the ICU beds. So you're talking about elective surgery. As I told you, the ICU capacity is being doubled by August next year. That's a huge increase, 25 million going into that, and a huge hospital rebuild, as well as $250 million extra going into that DHB over the last 9 years. And I can tell you the other thing, John, every other DHB around the country is managing to deliver the operations that are needed. This has been the Court case DHB. It can't be turned around in 2 minutes.
Okay, let's look at your media statement when you appointed the Commissioner back in June 2015. Health Minister Jonathan Coleman, who was sitting beside me now, and I'm delighted to have you there. Well, I'm very sorry about that. Your predecessor, this was you.
Yeah, it was me.
Has today written to Southern DHB dismissing all members of the board and replacing it with the Commissioner. The financial problems at Southern DHB are long-standing. I do not have confidence that the current government arrangements are suitable for delivering on the changes required in Southern DHB.
Absolutely correct.
Right. But you were driving monetary KPIs and you said jump and they said how high. And what we are seeing here is a direct result of your imperatives to reduce the deficit.
No, it's not. Look, the first thing is, John, you could not have the DHB continuing on that financial footing. Every month the figures we got were different, so you could not plan clinical care. So there's a number of steps to sustainability. It's financial, but it's clinical. The patients come first, it's the workforce, and it's the quality of services. And that's exactly as the Commissioner, I'm sure, would have told you yesterday as well.
We've got 1.5 minutes until 6 o'clock. Katrina's just reminded me that it's impending by walking in behind us. Welcome, Katrina. Can you tell me what people should do in the interim? Paul Schofield, for example, who has been waiting months and months and months for surgery. All the people we've spoken to, can you use Mercy more?
Well, look, the DHB has to have a very clear plan for getting those who need surgery, the surgery they need.
Is that an instruction from the Minister?
Oh, no, they know that. That's how it operates.
But they seem to both know it and not been doing it. What did you say to him today? Did you instruct him to spend more money to get work done?
No, look, he's got as much money as he can, but look, he is an excellent chief executive.
As much money as he can, but not as much money as he needs, Minister?
No, look, I know this is your central argument, but it's not correct. He's got a turnaround plan for all those services. He's going to turn around that toxic urology service, And he told me today, look, the numbers of people waiting for surgery is halved from 10 to 5 for that, radical prostatectomy. So here's the man to turn it around.
Overnight? How did that happen? I'm confused about that. Have some people just been removed from the list? I mean, the thresholds keep...
No, sorry, let's be clear. 5 of them have got dates, 5 are still waiting for dates.
Okay. They got dates today.
Oh, no, I don't know when he gave them.
They got dates since we raised it, Minister. That's good, though.
Well, I don't know if that's the case. But look, you're getting into a heck of a lot of detail. The big picture is there is enough money there. The Commissioner's doing a good job. We're rebuilding the hospital, and actually surgeries have gone up by 33% over time, and an extra nearly $250 million into the DHB. But performance needs to improve because patients come first.
Health Minister Jonathan Coleman, thank you for joining us.
Thank you, John.
Thank you.
RNZ News at 6. Ngā mihi nui, good evening. Ko Katrina Batanaho. The Green Party co-leader Matiria Ture says her ruling herself out of any potential ministerial positions is the price she'll pay for her past actions. Mrs Ture will not resign over revelations she was registered on the electoral roll at her daughter's father's address in the 1990s despite not living there. At a news conference this afternoon, Mrs Ture said she considered resigning but decided to stay on. She says she made some foolish decisions as a young person.
I accept that people want me to be held accountable for my past actions, and I need to show some respect for that. Giving up my intention to be Minister for Social Development is a price that I'm paying for that. But I also know that people are asking me not to resign.
The Green Party co-leader Matiria Ture. Senior doctors at Dunedin Hospital have described the situation at the Southern District Health Board as a slow-motion train crash. In a joint letter to management, which has been leaked to Checkpoint, some of the hospital's most senior medical staff say nothing has been done to prevent the crisis. A Dunedin GP, Daniel Pettigrew, has told Checkpoint he has one patient who's been waiting 14 months for a biopsy to know whether he has prostate cancer. Others have been waiting longer than 7 months.
The reality is you can only underfund a health service for so long before that starts translating to the frontline services, and that's exactly where we are now.
Dr Pettigrew says the problems are not just in urology but in other departments across the board. Auckland's Mayor has described as a start the government announcement it will bring forward the dates for 5 major transport projects totalling $2.6 billion. All 5, including the Northwestern Busway, are already on a 30-year list agreed between the council and government, but will now start sooner and within the coming decade. The Minister of Transport, Simon Bridges, can't yet say who'll pay for what on the list.
That will involve additional funding from government, but I'll have, and the government will have, much more detail around that and issues such as that funding and the splits there and exactly how that will work as we work through that in a lot more detail in coming weeks.
Transport Minister Simon Bridges. A grand jury has issued subpoenas in connection with a June 2016 meeting that included President Donald Trump's son, his son-in-law and a Russian lawyer. The move signals an investigation is gathering pace into suspected Russian meddling in the 2016 US election. United States intelligence agencies have concluded that Russia worked to tilt the presidential election in Mr. Trump's favour. Robert Mueller, who was appointed special counsel in May, is leading the probe, which also examines potential collusion by the Trump campaign with Russia. Moscow denies any meddling and Trump denies any collusion, while regularly denouncing the investigations as political witch hunts. A court hearing has taken place over an alleged plot to set off a bomb on a plane leaving Sydney. Khaled Kayat and his brother Mahmoud Kayat are alleged to have planned to smuggle an improvised explosive device onto a Jakarta-bound plane from Sydney. They're also accused of planning to detonate a gas bomb with highly toxic chemicals. Federal Police Deputy Commissioner Michael Fallon says officers thwarted one of the most sophisticated terror plots ever attempted on Australian soil.
We do believe that through the wonderful efforts not only of law enforcement but in particular our intelligence agencies that we have completely disrupted this plot. So not only have we stopped now the IED that was believed to go on the plane, but we have also completely disrupted the intended chemical dispersion device.
Australian Federal Police Deputy Commissioner Michael Fallon. The name of the man found dead beside a South Canterbury river can now be named as Michael Andrew Phillips. The body of the 45-year-old man from Fairley was discovered earlier this week on the banks of the Opihi River next to his vehicle by a local police officer. A post-mortem examination revealed that Mr Phillips had sustained several injuries before his death. The Rural Area Commander, Dave Gaskin, says the police are now trying to figure out the events leading up to Mr Phillips' death. There could be further record rainfalls over the next 3 months. NIWA climate scientist Nava Fidaif says the Wellington, Otago and mid to South Canterbury regions have all had more than 150% of the rainfall that would normally have been expected in July.
Sure, it's winter and we should expect big rain events and snow to sea level and things like that, but it has been a lot busier than usual. It's been very active, and that's due to the passage of a few low-pressure systems, some storms that tracked across the country during the month.
Nava Fidaif says the next 3 months in general look like they'll be wetter than usual right across the country. It's 6:05. To sport, the Lions coach Johan Ackermann says his side simply can't afford to divert from their game plan if they're to become just the second South African side to win the Super Rugby competition. The Pretoria-based Bulls are the only previous South African franchise to have won the title, and Ackermann says if the Lions are to join them, they need to play mistake-free rugby.
Just look at the Crusaders pack. It's definitely a pack that plays a lot together at test level as well. It's a quality pack, and therefore, they've shown through the whole year that they are a quality side. But saying that, with the backline that they've got, there's a lot of X factor that you have to contain.
Johan Ackermann. Former NRL stars Curtis Rona and Marika Koribeti are among 7 uncapped players named in the Wallabies squad for the opening Bledisloe Cup and Rugby Championship tests against New Zealand later this month. Canterbury easily retained the Ranfurly Shield this afternoon, demolishing challengers Mid-Canterbury 69-7. And the former world heavyweight champion Vladimir Klitschko retired because the fire wasn't there anymore, says his long-term manager Bernd Boente. The 41-year-old has ended his 21-year professional career 3 months after losing to Briton Anthony Joshua at Wembley. That's the news.
Tomorrow morning, veteran BBC journalist Kate A.D. recalls the Iranian embassy siege of 1980. Toa Fraser has made a movie of it. Canadian Judge Ian Binney on his recommendation to compensate David Bain, which was not taken up, and Rennie Edo-Lodge on how her book, Why I'm No Longer Talking to White People About Race, has led to huge numbers of people, white and otherwise, wanting her to talk about race. Join me tomorrow morning from 8 o'clock here on RNZ National.
Met service weather through to midnight tomorrow. Gisborne, Hawke's Bay, Wairarapa and Wellington. A few showers clearing tomorrow and fine spells increasing. And for the rest of the North Island, fine, apart from isolated showers in Auckland and Coromandel tomorrow. Coastal Marlborough, a few showers clearing tomorrow and becoming fine. For the remainder of the South Island, mainly fine, however light rain in Buller, Westland and Fiordland tomorrow night. The Chatham Islands, cloudy periods and a few light showers. It's 6:05, and you're listening to Checkpoint.
Thank you very much, Katrina Batten. Have a wonderful weekend.
You too, John.
Thank you. The controversy over Materia Ture's benefit fraud has torpedoed her ministerial aspirations. Today she ruled herself out of any ministerial positions if the Green Party forms part of the next government, although she will not resign as co-leader. Labour says it raised some concerns about Mrs Ture's historical welfare issues and told the Greens if she didn't rule herself out as a future minister, it would have done so. Materia Ture's announcement came after it is revealed she deliberately registered on the electoral roll at an address she wasn't living at so she could vote for a friend. I asked her why she ruled herself out as a future minister.
Well, I think it was important. I think it's important to focus the issues back on the people who matter the most, and that's not me. And I, have my personal ambitions about what I would like to achieve.
And sorry to interrupt immediately, but you wanted to be Minister of Social Development, didn't you? You really wanted that position.
Yep, that's right. That's the position that I set my heart on, and I've worked hard for. But I said a few weeks ago actually that one of the price I might have to pay for telling my story would be giving that up, and that if it was necessary I would do that, because because the most important issue is getting the change. And so I just think, I knew it was a possibility. After last night's story, I think it just became much more of a possibility.
And why? What changed? What do we now know that is so problematic?
Well, I mean, it is all old historical stuff. And that I made a foolish decision as a young woman around enrolling in one electorate when I was living in another. And, I understand it. I understand how that looks, and I understand people would be upset about that. And I do think as a public figure I have to take some responsibility for that, even if it's historical. I do need to recognise people's concerns, if that makes sense.
Did you live with your daughter's father at any time while you were receiving the DPB?
No, I didn't.
Absolutely full stop.
Yeah, absolutely full stop.
And so if your sins, for want of a better term, were already known largely except for this false address, and if you believe that what you have done has the merit of having put something important on the public agenda, why resile from it now? In other words, why are you standing down now?
I've ruled myself out of taking a cabinet portfolio. I'm staying on as an MP and as a co-leader because the work is to change the government and to make sure we transform the welfare system. That's the work I've got, to defend the people who can't speak out for themselves. I think acknowledging my historical wrongs was important. I think it was important to...
but it wasn't so important that you didn't stand down as co-leader. It wasn't so important that you didn't say, hey, do you see what I mean? In a way, this is neither one thing nor t'other. It's a strange balancing act between a full mea culpa and a full, hey, what I did, I don't resile from.
Well, what do I think about that? I think I accept that people want me to be held accountable for my past actions, and I need to show some respect for that. Giving up my intention to be Minister for Social Development is a price that I'm paying for that. But I also know that people are asking me not to resign. It's been a huge wave of that, and because they need and want somebody who will stand up and talk about their issue.
Okay, now Jacinda Ardern...
I'm trying to find that space.
Right, and also you are finding a space that accommodates a resurgent Labour Party, aren't you? And Jacinda Ardern said after your announcement, but it is also apparent that the Labour Party made this clear to the Green Party prior to your announcement, that you would not be invited to join a Labour-led cabinet. In other words, are you making a virtue of necessity here?
I haven't heard that statement from them. I mean, they certainly expressed concern this morning, and I always knew that this could be a price I would have to pay. So it seems I've always wanted to be a leader who takes responsibility for what she does and the decisions that she makes. And one of those is stepping forward and being really clear with the public about what I'm doing and why. And so I just felt that it was absolutely best for me to accept that under the MOU, in respect to the MOU, and with a focus on the changing the government at the election, that I needed to take some kind of step.
Okay, sorry. So were you doing the right thing, or were you doing the right thing for Labour?
Oh, no, I think I'm doing the right thing for everybody.
Okay. And had Jacinda Ardern said, your stand was so principled and the issues you raised were so important that we will still invite you to be part of Cabinet, what would you have said?
If they said that to me, I would feel really honoured by that, but I would still have to consider whether it was the best thing to do. And so I just, I made the best decision I could in the circumstances, knowing that there was likely to be a price to pay for my historical wrongs, but
it was the second historical wrongs, wasn't it? It was the second. Because you seem to, the first sort of admission of historical wrongs seems to have actually galvanised support for the Green Party. You reached 15%. Lots of, hashtag I am Materia on Twitter. Obviously, you polarise people, and some people are saying this woman's taking the piss and get her out of Parliament. But the constituency you were talking to suddenly noticed you were there. All of a sudden, there is a second revelation, not from you in this case, of historical wrongs. And did that muddy the waters? Did that confuse people about whether they could trust you?
I think it disarmed and alarmed some people. I mean, I did about a week after I went public with my benefit circumstances, I did say publicly that I recognise that one of the costs might be not being Minister of Social Development. So, I went into this knowing that I may have to give that up. So in order to show respect for the people who are really concerned about my historical wrongs, to demonstrate some leadership and taking responsibility for that, and also in recognition of the important relationship that the Greens do have with Labour, because we want to change the government and be in government together after September. I just thought this was the right decision to make.
What I'd love to ask you, and it's a silly note really to end on, but you got into all this trouble to vote for someone called KT Julian in Mount Albert, right?
Yes.
And there was a candidate called Materia Ture in New Lynn. So
yes,
you didn't even lie to vote for yourself.
No. He was my best mate.
Right.
There you go.
Materia Ture, who will not be in the next cabinet if Labour and the Green Party get to form it. Lots of feedback coming in on the situation at the Southern DHB. We've been doing this work for about a fortnight now, a lot of it, and it culminated in an interview with Jonathan Coleman responding to much of what's been said over the past fortnight. Hi, John. As an ICU nurse, intensive care nurse, I'd like to point out there is a huge difference between HDU and ICU. We trained for years to work in ICU. Is Southern DHB going to be staffed for 18 beds with ICU trained nurses? I guarantee not. Chris Fleming is cutting nursing leadership positions in the Southern District Health Board as we speak. And some of the people we've been talking to off the record, one of them texted me before and said, hey, more ICU beds, where are the nurses coming from? So lots of that kind of feedback. John, as a doctor, the minister is mad. An HDU bed can't just be turned into an ICU bed on an as-required basis. It's logistically and practically impossible in terms of staffing and equipment. Now, this is also from someone who works at the Southern DHB. Thank you for keeping Dunedin Hospital on the radar. I work in the operating theatres and see firsthand the problems we encounter every day through lack of resources such as low level of ICU beds, lack of theatre space, staffing, inadequate sized theatres and doorways to carry out our jobs effectively. It is about money and it is about staff not being heard about everyday issues that affect us during our working day. Our emergency surgery list is lined up on the computer screen and is a never-ending revolving door. Often we have 3 of our 9 theatres in the main theatre department going with emergency surgery only, never mind the elective surgery that also needs to be attended to. At weekends, emergency surgery continues throughout the day, and on Sundays there are 2 theatres open for emergency surgery as opposed to 1 theatre open continuing for emergency surgery on Saturdays. Emergency surgery is the silent cost the DHBs have to bear and is obviously unpredictable. Thank you for keeping your work in. Thank you for your good work in keeping this immensely important subject on the table. And this person says, Phil says, good job for bringing Coleman out of the bunker. What a fatuous piece of sloganeering. A commissioner should arrive with emergency powers to achieve urgent change. 2 years on, bumping HDU patients to cover ICU needs, hopeless. What if the $250 million tax discount for offshore banks had been available to the health system? So much feedback tonight. Thank you for it. And thank you also for listening to Checkpoint. We're getting lots of feedback from people who don't live in Dunedin, and we entirely appreciate your engagement on this subject. A family who was facing eviction from their state house just a few weeks after their mother died in a car crash will now be allowed to stay in a Housing New Zealand home. Midia Isera, who's 27, and the 9 members of her family who live with her, including a newborn baby, had been given just 3 weeks to leave their home in Mangarewa. But today, after their plight became public, Housing New Zealand rang her to say it had changed its mind. Rowan Quinn reports.
Miria Esera says a weight has been lifted off her mind. She had worried her family, which includes her children and siblings, would end up on the street.
I've been crying. I've only had maybe at least 3 or 4 hours sleep every night because I'm thinking about where am I supposed to take my family. I've got a lot on my shoulders, but knowing that Housing New Zealand has made a change has actually taken a lot off, and I can actually grieve properly.
Housing New Zealand's told her she may have to move to a different house to the one the family's called home for 10 years.
It's mainly for the kids that I'm looking out for. As long as they've got a roof over their head, they are warm, I'm fine with that.
The Associate Social Housing Minister, Alfred Ngaro, offered the family his condolences. He says Housing New Zealand didn't have the full information about their situation at its first assessment, including the fact that Miria cared for some younger siblings.
They were able to sit down with her, realise actually she had some guardianship responsibilities. Once they did the reassessment, that she was eligible. So the system is there to help. Sometimes if you don't get all the information, it makes it a little bit harder.
The family's case was the second to come to light this week of people being told to move from their state home soon after the death of the leaseholder. It's standard policy for Housing New Zealand to give tenants 3 weeks' notice in those circumstances, although extensions are available. But Alfred Ngaro says the current system is working in most cases if officials have the right information, and there's no need to change the rules. Miria Esera says she believes her family will have a roof over their heads because of the publicity, and she worries for other families in similar situations who can't get the help they need. I Tāmaki Makaurau mō te hōtaka o te ahiahi ko Rowan Quinn tēnei.
Coming up to 6:21, you're with Checkpoint on Friday night. Everyone enjoys a party, except perhaps, in this case, the National Party, because a taxpayer-funded calendar Jerry Brownlee sent out to his constituents in Ilam includes a number of important errors. One of them, the apparent cancellation of New Year's Eve. Conan Young reports.
New Year's Eve, a time for looking back on the year that was and perhaps making a few resolutions for the year ahead when you party with friends and family. But a calendar sent out at the start of this year by Jerry Brownlee to the good folk of Ilam appears to have cancelled all of the fun. According to this otherwise bland-looking piece of promotional material, this year there's no December the 31st. The night's been called off. April 30 is missing too, and a whole 2 days are missing from the end of July. And in Ilam, the next school holidays will start on September the 25th, a week earlier than the rest of the country. But while these mistakes might be forgiven, it's the prospect of missing out on New Year's Eve that today worried most people in Mr Brownlee's electorate. We're just having a chat to people about a calendar that the local MP, Jerry Brownlee, has sent out to people. I don't know, did you receive anything like that in the mail?
No, and I'm one of his constituents, as you must say, living there in his electorate. But no, I haven't had any. I haven't seen it.
Well, look, the reason we're asking you about this calendar is that they've left out a few important dates. I might just be able to show you a copy here.
There's 30 days. There's 31 days in December.
You're right. You win the prize. And it's an important day, of course, isn't it, the 31st?
Oh, yes, Christmas Eve. I mean, New Year's Eve. New Year's Eve. Oh, dear me. Oh, well, so this is a calendar he's put out. And you're missing a very important date there.
Most people sort of, when they want to get the days right in the month, work out how many there are, they sing a little song to themselves, don't they? 30 days have September,
It's true.
April, June and November, and all the rest have 31, including December, which is, of course, an important date. But on this calendar, they seem to have left off the last day of that particular month.
That's extraordinary.
So we're just wondering if anybody's concerned that the government or the National Party may have canned New Year's Eve.
Well, they may well have done. You'll have to ask them.
How many days does December have? 31. That's a very important date too, isn't it?
It's New Year's Eve. Perhaps we're not going into next year. We're just sticking with 2017.
Do you like New Year's Eve? Is it?
Love New Year's Eve. I'm half Scottish, of course.
You'll still get to celebrate New Year's anyway.
I will, yes. Even if they change the date, we'll still celebrate it.
Are you terrified that National might have, the government may have cancelled New Year's Eve?
No. It'll happen. Regardless.
Are you still planning to celebrate New Year's even though the National Party seems to think it's not worth putting on the calendar?
Well, I guess we do it quietly these days. My days are layering up and gone, but no, I'm sure it'll still be a special night. Well, that's amazing. He's left that out. That is. I wonder who put that calendar together. Surely Jerry didn't do it. Well, how do you like that? Barry, did you know that? Did you know that Jerry Brown left off the 31st of December?
Sorry?
Jerry's put out a calendar.
Yes.
And there it is there. What's wrong with the calendar?
It leaves out the 31st of December, which of course is, I'm sure you enjoy that date yourself.
Well, it's always a good time of the year, isn't it, for partying?
And hopefully Labour might be a little bit better at putting out those calendars, perhaps.
I'm sure they are. If they can get their billboards right, they've got a chance of getting the calendars sorted.
Jerry Brownlee says the calendars, which cost $6,000 to produce, were paid for by parliamentary services, in other words with taxpayers' money, and were intended as a means of sharing his contact details with his constituents. His office was alerted to the mistake by a member of the public.
Rather than just being a card, we put the calendar on there thinking that people might find that useful. I guess losing 3 days off it is pretty embarrassing. Particularly since the last day lost is the 31st of December, and that's my brother's birthday and also my sister-in-law's birthday. So I hope they won't take it too personally.
He's unsure if the $6,000 cost of the calendar has been reimbursed.
Look, I'm not sure what details were entered into. I know it was paid for before the mistake was discovered. So there's always a discussion about who signed off what. I personally didn't sign off it, but I've got very good staff, and it's one of those embarrassing things that can happen.
Mr Brownlee notes that while the end dates are missing from April, July and December, all months on the calendar start on the correct days. In Ototahi for Checkpoint, ko Conan Young tēnei.
Lots of feedback with the time at 26 minutes past 6 on a Friday evening. Thank you for it. John Munro from Wellington. John, please contrast two politicians. Metiria Ture made a mistake, possibly two, some years ago, important but not life-threatening, now dealing with this in an open, honest and humble way. John Key makes all sorts of mistakes and caught out saying many untruths, but in answering questions remains permanently evasive, cynical and glib. Tell me, which of these two politicians would you trust the most? One's gone. I hope the other stays. Lots of feedback on the Southern DHB, though. That is what you have been focusing on tonight. What a disaster at Dunedin. Clearly the government has grossly underfunded their health service so they can crow about a surplus and dangle tax reductions for the wealthy. Mind-boggling passing of the buck by the minister, and to think New Zealand's flagship Otago Medical School operates in Dunedin Public Hospital. Dear John, I'm a surgeon. Every DHB is stretched. There are far too many administrators. In my DHB, we are overmanaged and poorly managed. There is a myopic obsession with budgets and government targets. The government increases funding, but this cannot keep up with baby boomer demand. There are many affluent New Zealanders who expect free elective surgery whilst telling me about their holiday houses, new cars or planned overseas trips. Those New Zealanders are going to have to wait to fund their own surgery, but that is a vote-losing conversation no politician wants to have. We are spending a fortune on some very frail people in the last 1 to 3 years of life with dementia, hip fractures, etc. We need a frank discussion about what is realistic as a society. What a great election issue. In my 25 years of DHB service, Labour and National are indistinguishable in their ability to sort this out. Please withhold my name, says that person whose name I will indeed withhold. As a Southern DHB staff member, that had me in tears. Staff work so hard with so little, and yet all the minister can do is point the finger at us. After working in Australia and Canada, it's so demoralising to work in a system that forestalled quality care for cost savings. New Zealand health services are a race to the bottom. Who can provide the cheapest care for the least money? Heartbreaking. John, my husband is a general surgeon at Dunedin Hospital, and I can absolutely confirm that they have one elective full-day theatre list a fortnight. One a fortnight. And that echoes what we were saying to the minister, 2 a month. 1 a fortnight, 2 a month. Hi John, a while ago I thought about moving to Invercargill as there is no way I will ever be able to buy a house in Auckland. Two of my specialists and a doctor in the high dependency unit told me not to because I would die due to the medical services under the Southern DHB not being adequate to treat some of my conditions. I'm glad I listen now. How do we attract people to the regions if core services are inadequate? I feel sorry for anyone not able to get the services they need. It's hard to believe we all live in the same country at some time. Thank you and your team for investigating this. Action is obviously well overdue. It's nice that person mentioned the team because they do a fantastic job, and I'm going to end tonight by reading out their names. Our executive producer Pip Keane, our producer Catherine Warbridge, our getter and producer Bridget Burke, Nita Blake Pearson and Michelle Cook do social and online and offline and all those things that old buggers like me don't really understand. Laura Tupou has been our reporter this week. Bradley White is our cameraman. Rangi Powick is in there on sound, and Kelvin Samuel, who's taking a shot and is going to wave, is our director. It's a fantastic team, and the work I front is very much a product of their outstanding labour. I'm proud and delighted to work for them. Thank you for your feedback. I hope you have a wonderful weekend, and we will see you Monday night at 5.
RNZ News headlines at 6:30. The Greens co-leader Matiria Ture says ruling herself out of any potential ministerial positions is the price she'll pay for her past actions. Senior doctors at Dunedin Hospital have described the situation at the Southern DHB as a slow-motion train crash. Auckland's mayor has described as a start the government's announcement it will bring forward the dates for 5 major transport projects totalling $2.6 billion. A grand jury has issued subpoenas over a June 2016 meeting that included President Donald Trump's son, his son-in-law and a Russian lawyer. A court hearing has taken place for the 2 men charged over the Sydney terror plot. 2 irrigation projects in South Canterbury and Central Otago will get more than $1 million in total in Crown funding. More record rainfalls are likely over the next 3 months.